Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you've taken the time to be here today. I know your schedule is really busy and your time is valuable. So I want to make sure that we cover what we cover gives you some real clarity, some actionable insight, and a new perspective on your health. So by the end of this session, you'll understand why foods that seemed harmless for years may now be triggering your symptoms, and how your gut and immune system are quietly communicating with you, and what steps you might take to finally start seeing those patterns that most people never even notice. So I want to thank you for showing up for yourself. This is the first step toward uncovering those hidden factors behind your fatigue, your bloating, brain fog, or joint pain. And as we go through today's session, I want to acknowledge that upfront that I can't cover every single detail about food sensitivities and gut health in this short time that we have together. There's just so much to know, and science is always evolving, and there's always new knowledge coming about. But my goal is to give you as much clarity and actionable insight as possible so you can start seeing those patterns in your own health. So think of this as a foundation of sorts. You'll have some tools and perspective to move forward, but it's not a substitute for that personalized advice you might get from your provider or healthcare practitioner. So if you have specific questions or complex conditions, I encourage you to keep working with your doctor or your coach or your practitioner or your specialist, and then alongside you and alongside what we learned today. Now, I want to set the stage and just let you know that you're in the right place. If you've tried elimination diets and journaling or cutting foods one by one, but nothing seems to crack that code. And you're in the right place if you rely on antacids or ibuprofen or skin creams to get through the day without realizing your gut might actually be behind those symptoms. You're in the right place if you've been told that your labs are normal, but you feel anything but normal. And you're in the right place if you suspect foods might be a piece of that puzzle, but you can't quite put your finger on it yet. And if any of that sounds familiar, you're exactly where you need to be today. Together, we're going to untangle some of the confusing world of food reactions, what they are, what they aren't, and how to finally start seeing those patterns most people never notice. Because here's the thing, many food sensitivities don't hit you with a big obvious reaction. They sneak up on you with delayed effects like fatigue or brain fog or bloating or joint pain, sometimes hours or even days after you've had the food. So by the end of the session, you'll have a tool to start decoding your body's signals and a clearer path forward for your health. So again, thank you for showing up for yourself, and that's really the first step on a journey towards feeling better. I'd like you to let me know in the chat. Think about your top symptom. Pick any one of these. Which one is the most prevalent for you? And just put the number in the chat for me. This will kind of give me a snapshot of where everyone is at, where everyone is starting from. I see pain. Yes, I see that a lot. Joint pain. That's a very common one, and it's so sneaky and tricky to pinpoint where it comes from or what the cause is. Let me move this waiting room out of the way so I can see what you all are writing. Digestive issues, yes. So think about how much time and energy and money you've already spent trying to figure this out. And now ask yourself, a year from now, if nothing changes, what will it cost you? Where will you be at? And that's really why I created this webinar. My goal is to give you some clarity around one of the most overlooked root causes of digestive issues and fatigue and chronic inflammation, and that's food sensitivities. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to share why I am so passionate about this topic. Now, I've worked in conventional medicine for over 2 decades, and I can say without hesitation that conventional medicine or conventional care saves lives. But when it comes to chronic issues like bloating and fatigue and joint pain or skin problems, the system often falls short. Time and again, I saw patients being told your labs are normal. It's just stress. Or my least favorite, it's all in your head. And, the people end up with diagnoses like IBS or fibromyalgia, etc. Now, meanwhile, I was facing my own health challenges. I had reflux, I had bloating, I had gas, I had joint pain, and I had psoriasis for many, many years. And I went and saw my doctor, and he ran some tests, and yes, most of them came back normal. Wasn't nothing to be found. And the solutions he had for me, there were acid reducers for my reflux, some creams for my psoriasis, ibuprofen for my joint pain. So none of it really would solve my issue. If I stopped taking them, my symptoms would come back. So they weren't anything that would address the root cause. So I kept digging, and everything changed when I ran functional labs on myself, including a food sensitivity test. And suddenly those hidden triggers, they became clear. My immune system and my gut were in a constant state of reaction. And once I made those connections and addressed those triggers, my digestion improved, my joint pain is pretty much gone, my skin is clear, no more psoriasis, and I finally started to feel like myself again. I could actually walk up and down the steps without crying because my knees hurt so bad. And that's really when I shifted into functional work. People deserve more than it's just IBS. They deserve answers. You deserve answers. You deserve to see the patterns your body has been quietly signaling all along. So take a moment and think about how often have you felt dismissed? How often have you been told your symptoms aren't real or they're just a normal part of aging? I've heard that a million times. Now, just because something is common doesn't mean that it's normal. So you're not weak, you're not broken or lacking in discipline. Your body is signaling that something deeper is going on and you need just a new way to listen. So as we move along, I encourage you to type any questions you have into the chat. And then I'll keep an eye on the chat and I'll address as many of the questions possibly as I'm going along if I don't lose my focus, but definitely at the end during the Q&A session. So don't hesitate to ask along all the way. They'll all be tallied up and I'll make sure to get to them because I want you to leave here with clarity. So why do we even need testing like this in the first place? Because the way your body reacts to food isn't always straightforward. It's not as simple as eat this and get sick. So here's where most people get tripped up. And honestly, even many doctors don't explain this very well or have a clear understanding of it. So there are three main ways your body can react to food: allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities. And they may sound familiar, but they're actually quite different. And knowing the difference is key to your understanding of your symptoms. So let's start with the allergies. These are often dramatic and immediate. Your body sees a certain food as a dangerous invader, and it launches a full-on emergency response. So you can think of hives, swelling, difficulty breathing, even life-threatening like anaphylaxis. So allergies are usually really obvious. Eat the food and your body reacts fast, usually within minutes to a couple hours. Now, next up are food intolerances. These aren't immune driven. Instead, they're usually caused by a missing enzyme or an inability to break down certain components of the food. So think of lactose intolerance, for example. So for many people, a little dairy is fine, but too much and it'll lead to bloating and cramps and diarrhea. So these reactions are often dose dependent, meaning that you can have a small amount of it and it not cause much of a problem, but if you have larger amounts, then it can really overwhelm your system. Now, food sensitivities, they are the sneaky middle ground. Unlike allergies, they trigger a delayed immune response. So instead of that fast IgE antibody reaction, sensitivities often involve IgG antibodies or immune complexes or both. So the symptoms can take 24 to 72 hours to actually show up. And this delay is what makes it really hard to connect cause and effect. And those symptoms can be all over the map. Some are digestive, like bloating, gas, diarrhea, the common ones. You might expect that, but others are systemic: fatigue, headaches, achy joints, skin flare-ups, brain fog, irritability, even mood swings. So this list isn't complete. It's not all inclusive, but you kind of get the idea. It's just could be any random symptom, really. So let me ask you, when you think about your symptoms, what fits you best? If you have any kind of reactions, are they immediate and obvious, like allergies? Or are they dose dependent, like intolerances, like lactose intolerance? Or are they more slow building and hard to connect, like the food sensitivities? Yeah. And I get that most of you probably fall into that latter category, which is why that's why those issues are so hard to solve alone. And you might wonder, I used to tolerate these foods. Why are they causing problems now? It is because your body is incredibly adaptive and resilient. Its job is to keep you alive and functioning well for as long as it possibly can. So it will compensate for dysfunction and imbalances for a long time to protect you. But eventually it will run out of steam. So when symptoms show up, it means that the dysfunction has been brewing under the surface for quite a while. And your body finally got to the point where it can no longer compensate. It can no longer make up for any dysfunction or deficiency. And that's why foods that once seemed harmless can now trigger reactions. They're pointing to a deeper issue. Now, you might be wondering, where does celiac disease fall in all this? The celiac disease isn't an allergy or an intolerance or a simple sensitivity. It's actually an autoimmune disorder. So gluten triggers your immune system to attack its own tissue, especially in your small intestines. So that's why even a tiny amount of gluten can cause damage, even if symptoms aren't obvious. But most people I see with symptoms like bloating and fatigue and all the ones I've already mentioned, they aren't dealing with allergies or celiac. They often fall into that sensitivity zone, which gets overlooked, that delayed symptom zone. But so to sum it up, allergies are the immediate and obvious. Intolerances are predictable and dose dependent. Most people know, if I eat this ice cream, I'm going to get some diarrhea and cramping. And so people that have intolerances typically know what's coming their way, and so they just plan for it, I guess. And then sensitivities are delayed, they're systemic, and they're often cumulative also. They add on top of each other. So most of you listening are probably dealing with sensitivities that's slow building, hard to connect kind, and that's exactly why it's been so tough to solve on your own. So I'm going to get a little bit more sciencey, even more now. on you here, but I promise it's worth it because understanding this is just really important. So far we talked about the differences between allergies and intolerances and sensitivities. So now I want to take a much deeper look at another root cause that often goes unnoticed, and that is your gut barrier. And I'm not really a fan of the term root cause because there's rarely just one thing, but it's the language that most everybody understands. So let's just use it like for right now. But I want you to think of your gut lining like a finely woven coffee filter. Now, its job is simple, but it's absolutely critical. It lets the good stuff, nutrients and water, pass into your bloodstream while keeping the larger particles like undigested food, bacteria, toxins, it keeps those out. So when this filter is intact, everything flows smoothly and your immune system stays calm and relaxed. But this filter is really delicate, and there are quite a few things that can slowly erode it over time. Chronic stress, medications, especially NSAIDs and antibiotics, infections, inflammatory foods, even environmental toxins like the residue on your dishes from your dishwasher tabs. They can all chip away at this protective lining. And what happens next is a condition called increased intestinal permeability or hyperpermeability, commonly known as leaky gut. Have you heard of leaky gut before? Let me know in the chat if you're familiar with that term. And this isn't usually a sudden thing, but a slow, cumulative process that can go unnoticed for years. Yeah, you all heard of this word. Some famous doctor, sure. And at first you might not notice any symptoms because, your body is compensating. It works overtime to maintain that balance. It jumps into action behind the scenes. But meanwhile, your immune system is quietly on this high alert, quietly ramping up inflammation, a slow burn you may not feel right away. Now, once you think back to some time where you maybe felt off, maybe some fatigue or some mild bloating or a skin flare that seemed to come kind of out of nowhere. Could it be that maybe your coffee filter was starting to leak and you didn't even realize it? Now, there's lots of scientific research that shows that leaky gut can contribute to a broad spectrum of symptoms and conditions, from digestive troubles that I already talked about to systemic issues like chronic fatigue and joint pain. Even autoimmune conditions can stem from this leaky gut. So understanding this gut barrier dysfunction is just a key to unraveling why food sensitivities develop and persist. So it's not just about what you eat, but how your gut and immune system interact with those foods through this delicate filter that we can call the coffee filter. I'm going to break it down even a little bit more and show you exactly how this happens. It's like a chain reaction unfolding inside your gut. Your gut barrier, your gut lining, is made up of just a single layer of specialized cells called the epithelial cells. So you can think of this lining as a very delicate, finely woven fabric, or you can just stick with the coffee filter. Either one is fine. So if you look at the diagram here on the left side, you can see these healthy, tightly packed cells. They're all sitting snugly together, just next to each other, forming this really tight barrier. Now, these little red lines here that you see between those cells, those are the areas where the cells can decide to let nutrients and water through. Now, on the right side, the cells have been damaged. And this damage can come from many foods or many sources, like certain foods, chemicals, medications, gut infection, even those environmental toxins I already mentioned. So when this layer is damaged, the cells no longer sit close together, like a perfect picket fence, for example. So you can imagine some of the panels are missing from your fence, and now the neighbor's dog can just come right into your yard. And that's essentially what happens when your gut barrier breaks down and those small gaps form between those cells. Things that normally should never get through, like that undigested food particles, the bacteria or viruses or toxins, they can escape from your gut lumen and enter that tissue that lies beneath that single layer of cells. So at first, your immune system, especially those immune cells that live right there beside in that area, they can act like a vigilant neighborhood watch. So it catches those invaders and deals with them right there on the spot. But if the damage continues too long, or it happens repeatedly over and over, your immune system can become overburdened. And when that happens, those unwanted particles can make their way beyond your gut tissue and enter into the bloodstream. And this is when your immune system starts to get activated even more persistently. At first you have that lower immune response that's subtle and just may only cause very mild symptoms. But with that repeated exposure, it really can escalate. So your immune system begins releasing substances like histamine and cytokines and other immune complexes, and they travel throughout your body in your bloodstream, causing that inflammation, not just locally in your gut, but systemically. And this is the core of how food sensitivities develop and persist. The food and the substances that you tolerated for years, eggs, nuts, dairy, coffee, any number of things, they now trigger immune reactions throughout your body. Understanding this process helps explain why reversing food sensitivities requires more than just avoiding a food once and then symptoms start to go away. It means healing the gut barrier and calming the immune system, and fixing these gaps are really crucial to quiet us all down. Let's talk about why the foods you eat most often can be the very ones your immune system winds up reacting to. So imagine if you will, if you had a bruise on your arm. So you gently touch it and it's not a big deal. But if you poke it over and over for days and months and years, it never gets an opportunity to heal. And the pain just persists or even gets worse. And that's what repeated food exposure does when your gut barrier isn't intact. The foods you rely on as staples, your go-to items every day, like eggs and grains or dairy, they get processed by your immune system again and again. And if your immune system or if your immune defenses are already sensitive, each meal is like a new poke that keeps the immune response going and going. So that repeated contact with the same foods, especially when the gut barrier is vulnerable, it can keep that inflammation smoldering and eventually can light up new symptoms. And this is why sometimes the healthiest foods can suddenly turn on you. They're the ones your immune system meets most often. And so it just causes problems in that way. So if you want to take a moment and think about a food that you've eaten daily for years, are there any that started to cause symptoms like fatigue or bloating or joint stiffness or mood changes, hours or even days later? And that's the hard part, because it's really hard to connect the food with the symptoms just because of that delayed response. But now here's somebody having trouble with the slides. You can see them now. Okay, all right, great. Now here's some really encouraging news. Your gut is not stuck in the state it's in today. The lining of your small intestine actually turns over completely about every 3 to 5 days. And the lining in your colon turns over every 7 to 10 days. So that means that they are both constantly regenerating. So if we can identify and remove those foods and triggers that are causing that stress, your body has the ability to produce a healthier, stronger gut lining. And over time, this can reduce that inflammation in your gut, but also the systemic inflammation that causes all your symptoms. It can improve your digestion and help those symptoms really calm down. Now, it's not instant, but it is reversible. And that's why taking steps, even small ones, can have a big impact. You don't have to wait for a magic fix. If you don't hear anything I'll say today, I want you to hear this one. Your body is designed to heal. If you give it the right environment and the right resources, it knows exactly what to do to get well. And for many, connecting these dots is what finally brings some answers. And that's why testing can reveal these hidden triggers that, routine blood tests really can't do. There's another thing that often gets overlooked, and that's how once leaky gut develops and food sensitivities appear, they initiate this vicious cycle that affects your gut's ability to heal. So every time you're exposed to a trigger food, it doesn't just create an isolated reaction, it keeps your gut barrier from repairing itself fully. Because this chronic repeated immune activation just maintains that hyperpermeability of the barrier, and it makes it much harder for those delicate epithelial cells to reconnect and restore that tight seal. You almost could think of it like a smoldering fire just beneath the surface. Every exposure to a food your body is sensitive to is like tossing another twig onto that slow burning fire. And with each twig, the fire persists and it maintains this state of quiet defense rather than allowing for repair and regrowth. And the longer this cycle continues, of course, the wider the area of the gut barrier that's affected, more gaps will form and more food particles and bacteria and toxins can cross into your system. And over time, it just doesn't get any better. So when you think about, consider how the patterns in your life, the patterns in your diet, your stress, your daily exposures that have persisted over months or years, which habits might be quietly fueling this ongoing fire? And sometimes it's just ordinary routines, the foods you reach for each day, the long-term chronic stress that raises your cortisol and creates more inflammation, even recurring medications or environmental exposures. All of them can keep this cycle going. And so when you understand how this self-perpetuating loop continues, you'll know why interrupting that cycle is so crucial. I already said that the lining of your gut is regenerating constantly. So when we remove those trigger foods and support healing, then those epithelial cells can regenerate a healthier version of themselves. And it can restore this gut barrier integrity and reduce that inflammation. And over time, that helps stop new sensitivities from forming, and it allows your gut to start recovering. So now you can understand why leaky gut doesn't just show up as bloating or irregularity. Once those tiny gaps form and those particles leak, your immune system responds. And the effects, they can ripple across multiple systems. I've already mentioned this a few, but I'm going to drive this home here now. It's, fatigue, especially afternoon crashes, brain fog or trouble concentrating, mood swings or irritability, joint aches and stiffness, skin flare-ups like rashes or eczema or psoriasis, digestive discomfort, bloating or irregularity. And how many people go to their doctor every week complaining of those things and never getting a real answer? But it's like dropping a stone into a pond. The stone itself only affects a tiny little area where it lands. But the ripples it creates, they spread out far and wide, and they can last a long time, and they can reach far and wide. and have just a huge amount of varied effects on your body. I want to talk about this woman that I met. She was in her 40s and she was struggling with eczema and fatigue. And she was very health conscious. Her friends called her the health nut. And every morning, like clockwork, she'd blend her green smoothie with, spinach, almond milk, protein powder, and she thought she was doing everything right. But here's the thing, despite all of her efforts, those stubborn eczema outbreaks, they kept coming back, and her fatigue, it was especially hard in the afternoons. She tried all sorts of creams and supplements, you name it. And of course, doctors kept telling her the labs looked fine and told her it was probably just stress or her skin was dry, put some lotion on it. And she knew that something wasn't quite right. She was journaling and watching what she ate, and but the flares would come and she never could quite figure out what it came from. And then she did the food trigger test and the results surprised her. Spinach and whey, the two things that she trusted to keep her healthy every day, showed up as her top sensitivities. And it wasn't an immediate reaction. Like I already said, food sensitivities don't have typically immediate responses. It was a delayed immune response, which made it really tricky for her to connect those dots. And then once she cut out those foods for a few weeks, everything started to improve. It wasn't the only thing she did, but it was a good start for her, and her eczema started to calm down and her energy felt steadier, and her afternoon crashes, she didn't have them anymore, and she started to sleep better even. And she didn't really expect that. But I think what made the biggest impression on her was just realizing that her body had been signaling this for some time, and it was like finally tuning into a subtle message that she's kind of been missing all along. So I want you to think about that for a moment. Isn't it frustrating when you do everything right, but your body still isn't cooperating? And if that story resonates with you, you're definitely not alone. And the best news is, she didn't have to overhaul her entire life or cut out everything forever. It was more about, taking a listen, taking the data that she got and giving her body a little break from those hidden triggers. And so, if you relate with that, maybe you can drop a me too. Now, regarding the food sensitivity tests or food trigger tests, it's important to know that these tests, especially those popular IgG panels, they're controversial in the medical community. Many experts caution that the IgG antibodies may reflect exposure or even tolerance rather than actual sensitivities. The unfortunate thing with this is that while many people find them to be very helpful, others aren't able to get them because, their practitioner or provider may not believe in the usefulness and the utility of them. But I know from my clients, these tests are one piece of that puzzle, a great place to get started. And ultimately, the goal is to understand your body's unique signals and tailor your approach to, what truly helps you feel better. So now that we explored leaky gut and food sensitivities, let's talk about a solution. And I've mentioned it a few times already, but it's the food trigger test. And this isn't just another blood test. It's more like taking a look under the hood of your body's immune system. It's a tool that reads your body's signals and uncovers hidden reactions you might never notice on your own. And why are so many people stuck? Because journaling, elimination diets, and cutting foods one by one often don't work. That's because of the delayed response and the systemic reactions that hide those real culprits. It makes it really hard to connect, your knee pain to the ice cream you had 3 days ago. So have you ever eaten something and thought that you were fine, and then only later on you started to feel kind of off? Maybe you got a headache. And that's the kind of reactions that this test aims to reveal. So we'll dive in how the test works and how it can give you some more clarity. So what does this test measure? So first, it measures how your body responds to certain foods, food colorings, additives, herbs, spices, even preservatives that you probably eat pretty regularly. And often the foods you consider healthy or go-tos, those are the ones that are triggering that low-level inflammation. So that repeated exposure can eventually lead to immune activation in those symptoms. And remember the coffee filter analogy? And those markers tell us if your filter, your coffee filter, if your gut lining is compromised. So elevated markers, they can indicate that food particles, bacteria, or toxin may be slipping through and just fueling that inflammation throughout your body and causing, even if you don't have actual digestive symptoms, they can still cause many problems downstream. Now, when it comes to sensitivity testing, not all tests are created equal. So most panels on the market, they only measure one thing, and that's IgG antibodies. And the problem is that that's only part of the picture. The testing I use goes a step further. It looks at both IgG and immune complexes. And why does that matter? Because sometimes it's not just the antibody itself causing symptoms, but the way it activates the rest of the immune system. So if you're only measuring one marker, you can miss some of the biggest culprits. Another key difference is that it doesn't just test foods. It also looks at common additives and colorings and preservatives, things that sneak into your diet without you even realizing it. So for many people, those hidden triggers are just as disruptive as gluten or dairy might be. And finally, the results are designed to be practical. So instead of handing you a confusing chart of numbers, the report makes it crystal clear what's safe, what's borderline, and what's best to be avoided. You even get guidance on how to rotate foods so you're not overwhelmed with what to eat. And that's why I use this type of testing in my practice. It gives us a more complete picture. It highlights those hidden triggers and it translates into, real steps that you can actually take to start feeling better. So when you get your food trigger test results, the biggest benefit is gaining a comprehensive view of what's happening inside your body. So rather than just focusing on a symptom or one food, the test gives you the whole picture. How multiple sensitivities, your gut health, and the immune response, how they all connect and impact your health as a whole. It's like switching from looking through, a tiny little keyhole to standing in a large, well-lit room with all the lights turned on. And suddenly you can see those patterns and connections that weren't clear before. So this clarity really is the foundation for making informed and confident decisions about your health journey. I want to tell you about another client of mine. She was in her 30s and she thought she was doing everything right. She was eating a whole foods diet. She was exercising. She was sleeping. She managed her stress. I mean, like a picture of commitment. And she was still dealing with migraines and fatigue and digestive issues. And when we ran her food sensitivity tests, what we found she was reacting to were things that she ate all the time: beef, green beans, and apples. It can't get any more common than that. There's nothing exotic about that. And suddenly her symptoms started to make sense. Her gut had been smoldering with that low-level inflammation and keeping these issues alive. So that test didn't just give numbers, it gave her clarity, and she could actually see the patterns and understand what her body was telling her, instead of just guessing. So that was really empowering. And so maybe you've tried elimination diets or food journals before, and the problem with that is it's still just guesswork. The reactions are so delayed and subtle It's nearly impossible to track them consistently. So if you think of your body like a car, you might hear a weird sound or see a warning light, you check engine light, but you can't see what's happening under the hood. And so the food trigger test, it's like taking your car to the mechanic, who can run the engine codes and find out exactly what's going on. So it doesn't just tell you something's wrong, it shows what's happening and where the stress is and what needs attention. And so without it, you're still guessing, hoping the problem will fix itself. And think about the last time that you ignored a warning light on your car. Would you keep driving it? So this test gives you a chance to spot problems early before they get worse, before they become severe. So here's how it works. So you register with your email with the link. I'm going to give it to you here in just a few moments, but you register with your email, and then you'll get an email from me with a link to order your package. And the kit gets shipped straight to your house. So it's super convenient. Now the test itself is really, really simple. It's an at-home finger stick blood collection. So it's quick, it's easy, no long lab visits, no invasive procedures. And then once you send your sample back, of course, the lab will analyze it for all those different reactions and all the gut barrier markers. And that'll give us some insights on what's going on. And then after you get your results, we'll meet in a one-on-one session to go through everything together. So we'll review your top sensitivities, talk about what your gut barrier markers mean, see how it all fits into your unique health story. And so I do want to be clear that this session will be an interpretation session. It will be more educational. I won't be making specific recommendations unless you're my client. There's a legal problem with that. But the goal is to give you clarity and help you understand your body's signal and empower you to just, make some informed decisions about your health. You'll have some data, something concrete to base your decisions on. So all of this, the at-home finger stick test, the detailed lab analysis, including the gut barrier markers, in your one-on-one interpretation session is bundled into a $600 investment. Now I want you to pause and really think about the alternative. Staying stuck means endless journaling, trying diet after diet with only temporary relief, taking supplements that at the best give you temporary, relief, or, might make a difference, and constantly wondering really why your body isn't responding. So this can be so exhausting, so frustrating, and it steals your energy, it steals your focus, your quality of life. So with this test, you can get clarity. You're not just guessing anymore. You get a detailed, personalized view of how your body is reacting to foods and additives and herbs and preservatives, plus the insight into your gut barrier. So that means you can finally start connecting the dots between what you eat and how you feel, and then take steps to actually make a difference. So imagine waking up with fewer symptoms, more energy, and the confidence of knowing which foods actually support your body and which ones are holding you back. And that's what this test offers, a real actionable path forward instead of the trial and error frustration. So it's an investment in understanding your body, taking control of your health, and finally breaking free, from that those patterns that have been holding you back for months or maybe even years. Now, for those of you that are fast action takers, I do have a bonus, and that's active for 72 hours. You'll get a trigger-free recipe book, and it's valued at $99. And with it, you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner recipes based on your individual test results. So everything that comes in your test result will be taken into account for this recipe book. So imagine starting every day knowing that your meals are going to be safe for you, they're going to be nourishing and designed to support your healing progress with no guesswork involved. So with this clarity, your next steps become manageable. So you can observe the patterns and make gradual adjustments on your own and paying close attention to how your body responds. And it will respond, I promise. You might also choose to work with a coach to create a more tailored approach based on your unique biology. But even if you use this insight only to finally understand what your body has been trying to tell you for months or even years, that awareness alone is just so powerful. So I do want you to remember that every flagged food on your test is a signal. It's not a verdict. Your body is communicating, here's what's stressing me. Here's where I need some support. And when you recognize these patterns, you can stop guessing and reduce that chronic inflammation and give your body the chance to heal. So you can think of it like this. You've checked the coffee filter, you identified the smoldering fires, you traced the ripples, you read the mechanics codes, and now you hold a clear roadmap with actionable tools in your hand. So it's time to act before those sparks ignite into an even bigger fire. Now, if you're still wondering, I want you to think back over the past year. How much time, energy, and money have you poured into journaling, guessing, doctor's visits, trying supplements, or experimenting with diets? And yet here you are, still stuck. And now imagine what it would feel like to finally have real clarity about what's happening inside your body. And that's exactly what that food trigger test offers. It's not a quick fix. Taking this test isn't going to solve your problem, but it's going to give you a roadmap, a way to spot those hidden patterns and connect those dots and make choices that will actually make a difference. So here's something to try. Take a moment and jot down the one symptom you'd love to resolve first and what it would mean for you to get control back. And if you're ready to take that step, remember that there's only one of me. And so, there's a limited amount of spots because I can't clone myself yet. I wish I could. And then, that personalized recipe book, of course, it'll expire in 72 hours. But your $600 investment isn't just a test. It really is clarity and understanding and tools to finally tackle one of the root causes of your symptoms and start to feel better. I did want to put this link in the chat. If you're interested, you can click on that. And with that, I appreciate your attention and I want to open it up to your questions. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and I will be happy to answer as many as I can. Now, a question I get pretty frequently is how accurate is this food trigger test? And so the test measures your immune system's IgG responses to a wide range of foods and all the other things I already mentioned. And so they can identify potential sensitivities. And while it's not a definitive diagnostic tool like allergy tests, it does offer some valuable clues to help you pinpoint foods that might be contributing symptoms. So it's best used along with your own observations and maybe some professional guidance. And let's see. I don't see any questions. Looking in the chat box here. Oh, there's one. Thank you, Pastor Dan. Another question I get, well, how long does it take to get results? So after you send in your sample, processing usually takes about 1 to 2 weeks. And then you'll get, after that, you get your personalized one-on-one interpretation session that helps you understand your results in great detail. Well, if you all don't have any other questions right now. Oh, Mary Lou, I'm in Kentucky, Central Kentucky, but I work virtually. So I work with people all over the world. So wherever you are, it's probably not going to be a problem unless you're in Canada. Canada is a little tricky. They have weird rules up there and they don't like to give people a lot of autonomy. So the recipe, so I got this question once, how is the recipe personalized? Yes, ma'am, one-on-one is going to be a Zoom call with cameras on and all the bells and whistles and a recording that you then also get. But yeah, the recipe book will be tailored based on whatever comes up on your test. So all the foods that you're reacting to will be removed from the database, and the recipes will only include ones that are safe for you. So those are really the big questions I get often. So, oh, and one other questions I get a lot is, what if there's some foods on there that I don't even recognize? I've never ate them, or they're weird words that I've never seen before, and that's also not a problem because some of the foods might be listed under less familiar names or scientific terms, so I can explain that. And then also, many of the preservatives and food additives that are used in the modern production of foodstuffs have unpronounceable names, but I do also have access to a database where I can figure out exactly what they're used in, where they're found most often, and help you figure out which ones of those might be problems. Typically, it's things that come in boxes or bags. So if you eat a whole foods diet, you'll have less of an issue in that department. Well, with that, I want to thank you so much for, it's 176. And that includes all the foods and the herbs and the additives and the chemicals. And then, of course, the gut barrier assessment, looking for sonulin, occluding, and LPS, and also candida. So it's very comprehensive. Yeah. So I really appreciate you spending this time with me. It's been a beautiful day here. Now, Mary Lou, it's 176 foods and things that are tested for in the test. That's not a dollar amount. It's just a number of markers that are assessed on the test. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I have a little bit of a lisp, but my mouth is dry because I've been talking so much. I've been trying to get a drink of water here and there, but I think that my tongue is sticking to the roof of my mouth now. But in any case, I'm excited if you want to join, if you want some assistance on this journey, I'll be excited to be part of that. And so if you're ready to take that next step, you can scan that QR code. Also, I've put the link in the chat. You can click on that. I want to leave you with this little quote from Bella Blue. Your body holds deep wisdom. Trust in it. Learn from it. Nourish it. Watch your life transform and be healthy. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. You can expect the replay tomorrow. Take care now. You're welcome.